Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to Belgium once again, but we can kind of say the Netherlands in this brewery's case as well. I'll tell you why a little bit later on in the video, but in any case we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are a relatively new addition to both the Dutch and the Belgian beer scene, but they've built a very good reputation for themselves over the years. They do a number of different styles, and a number of them are kind of traditional Belgian type beers, but they do a number of things that are a little bit more modern and American in style as well. So a very well-rounded brewery, this one, from what I gather. I actually first came across their beers in Japan, but didn't get the chance to try any of them, but I saw that very recently they've been releasing a few things through Systembolaget here in Sweden. So this is one of their first releases in Sweden for quite a while from what I understand. But the beer itself is a style that I very much enjoy, one that we've had many examples of on the channel over the years, but not one that is usually associated with Belgian breweries, in fact. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Baarle-Hertog, which is a Belgian exclave inside the Netherlands, in the very kind of southern part of the country, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar. So this particular beer is called Sans Pardon. It comes in at 11% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Stout aged in bourbon barrels. So yeah, like I said, I first came across De Dochter van de Korenaar at Liquor Shop Asahita in Taishibashi Maichi in Osaka. But yeah, I didn't really think to buy any other beers because I was more interested in trying the Japanese stuff. But yeah, when this one came through Systembolaget the other week, I thought, you know, let's have a look at this and see what it's all about. They released this one and the barley wine, but unfortunately the barley wine sold out before I got the chance to get a bottle of it. But like I said, 11% bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Stout, this one. I can't say that I've had many bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Stouts from Belgium, of course, so this one is a little bit unique in that regard. But like I said, this brewery has a very good reputation, so I'm really curious to see what they have to offer us. So let's crack on with this one then and see what this beer is all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Belgian playlist. I might put it in the Dutch playlist as well. I'll just need to think about that a little bit. But you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's crack on then and go on to my brewery notes, and I'll tell you a little bit about Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar. So yeah, a little bit of a mouthful, that one, I have to say. But yeah, on to my brewery notes anyway. So, Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar are based in the Belgian exclave of Baarle-Hertog, but the Dutch part of this town is called Baarle-Nassau. So you'll find it just a little bit to the southeast of, just to the kind of south of Breda, and also to the kind of northeast of Antwerp in Belgium. It literally is just kind of across the border from the Netherlands. It's really kind of strange actually. Some of the streets are in Belgium, some of the streets are in the Netherlands, some of the, you know, there's little squares where it's just a couple of buildings that are inside Belgium. So yeah, just take a little look at the map and see for yourself. But the brewery was founded back in 2007 by the Dutch couple Monique and Ronald Mengerink. So I do hope I'm pronouncing these right. I apologise for any bad pronunciations in this video. So yeah, this is why I said the brewery can be considered kind of Dutch and kind of Belgian. But Ronald actually grew up in Groningen in the north of the country, and he apparently became familiar with wild hops by chance when a friend pointed them out on the way home from school one day and told him, you know, you could make beer with these. So when he was 16, he was kind of really interested in chemistry, and so he researched this a little bit more and researched the other ingredients that were used in beer, and he basically took some of his mum's ingredients out of the pantry and made his first beer, which he said was not drinkable at all. But he continued to experiment with this, and a few years later, when he was 18, he produced what he called his first drinkable beer. So the idea of brewing beer never really left him though, and he took a course on brewing, and he read a lot of literature on beer over the years. But the Mechrink family actually lived in France, but eventually sold their home there and moved to Baarle-Hertog. So Ronald had worked running a handyman business, and this actually set him up quite well for making his own brewery. But the house they bought had a space that he thought might be suitable for brewing beer, and so he built a brewery in the home, and this included 6 1,000 litre tanks, and it allowed them to brew around 15,000 litres of beer per month. So the first beer that they made was released in August of 2007. This was the Noblesse, a Belgian blonde, and over the years they've continued to develop many other recipes. Like I said, some of them traditional Belgian style beers, some of them not. But the name of the brewery, Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar, this refers to the old Mechelen chronicles, where apparently Emperor Charles V stated in 1550 that he preferred, quote, the juice of the daughter of the ear of barley as opposed to the blood of the bunch of grapes. So basically saying he liked beer better than wine, and so the name of this brewery is a kind of tribute to that particular quote that he made. But like I said, over the years these guys have continued to develop more recipes. They built up a very good reputation for themselves, and as of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 95 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. But yeah, that is everything that I can really tell you about Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a look at this beer and see what it's all about. So one thing I would say about the beers from these guys is that the labels are very they're almost like kind of woody. I do really like the labels that these guys use. But there you can see the Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar bottle cap on this one. I'll just bring that in so the camera focuses on it a little bit more. There you go. But yeah, it's pretty cool actually, just like a little shield and a wee bit of barley sitting on the top of it there. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one is an 11% Imperial Stout aged in bourbon barrels, which is quite unusual for a Belgian brewery, if you like. But I should point out, if you actually look at where this brewery is, in Baarle-Hertog, it's actually this one side of the street is Dutch, the other side of the street is Belgian, but it's only this brewery. There's a little square there, and it's this brewery and the building next to it that's actually inside Belgium. So it's kind of an exclave inside an exclave, if you like, which is interesting. But yeah, this is a really nicely presented beer, this one. If memory serves me correctly, this beer was released as part of the Tillfällig sortiment through Systembolaget here in Sweden at the end of May. I think I paid 70 Swedish kronor for this, which translates to roughly €7, about £6 sterling, in the region of $8. And for what it is, an 11% bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout, I think that's not bad actually. But yeah, you can feel the density in this one when you hold the bottle as well. But as I say, very nicely presented, and it says on the side here that this one won a medal from the Zythos Consumer Trophy in 2022. So yeah, 330 millilitres this one. Let's get this guy out into the glass. This is called the Sans Pardon, and apparently this is a series of beers that these guys do. They've got a bunch of Sans Pardon ones which were apparently aged on Hungarian oak, if I remember correctly. At least that's what it says on the website, but I don't think that's been updated in a little while. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Little bit of smoke on the opening there, and it goes together really quite well when we do that. But yeah, very curious to try my first Belgian stout in quite a wee while. So let's get this guy out into the glass and see. Here we are. I have to say that does look very, very nice. So yeah, anyway, as you can see, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect of any Imperial Stout. The head on this one's holding up very nicely, but before it does disappear, we can see that it's poured with just under a finger of a frothy, very light, kind of beige, foamy coloured head there. There's some medium-sized bubbles just on the surface of the liquid, but other than that, the head is very foamy. There's one or two bumpier bubbles toward the top there. As I say, it looks very, very nice, this one. In terms of the colour of this beer, it's a lovely dark sort of ebony rosewood, which is exactly what you would expect from the style. If we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it. One or two big bubbles of carbonation sticking to the side of the glass, and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, and one or two little tiny bits of sediment particle floating around. But yeah, it certainly is in keeping with the appearance you would expect from an Imperial Stout. So yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts you put into the beer, will affect the colour too. But when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts that contain, you know, special B, black malt or whatever, it's very, very difficult to affect the colour of these without, without adding something crazy like beets or whatever in them. So yeah, Imperial Stouts and Imperial Porters are very difficult to affect with just barrel aging and adjuncts and stuff like this. But yeah, you can see the head on this one has faded down to be a nice kind of thinner, foamy layer. We do have all of the beer in the glass incidentally, and there's just a nice kind of ring around the edge of the glass in this one. But yeah, it does go together quite nicely, and as I say, the appearance is very much in keeping with what you'd expect from an Imperial Stout. So yeah, nothing else we need to say about the appearance of this beer. Let's have a little look at the aroma and just see what this has in store for us. Oh, now this is really quite interesting. I have to say this is one of the more mild Imperial Stout aromas that I've come across. You know, quite often they'll lean one way. They'll be a little bit more chocolatey, a little bit more brown sugary, or a little bit more roasty and toasty. I think they said this one is supposed to be a Russian Imperial Stout. Yeah, so normally the Russian Imperial Stouts have that kind of big roasty toasty backbone to them, and it's kind of, quite often it's obvious in the aroma, but not really here. This is a very, very smooth RIS, and that might suggest that the barrel is going to be quite powerful in the flavour of this one, but even in the aroma you don't get too much of the barrel. So yeah, very curious about this actually. I would have expected a little bit more kind of pungency on the aroma for sure. But yeah, aroma wise, the way this beer goes together I think is very, very nice in that sense. Yeah, you do, the more that you smell of this one, and I think the more this beer warms up, we will get more complexity out of it. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, let's just break this down a wee bit and describe it. So, as I say, not the most pungent of aroma, but what I'm getting as the backbone here is that lovely kind of smooth oaky character out of this one. I do wonder if it is a Hungarian oak in this, because it doesn't smell quite as smooth as American oak, but when they're specifically calling it bourbon barrel aged, then yeah, I think bourbon is only produced in the States. So yeah, be very curious to know about that. That was one of the things about looking at these beers. It was kind of a wee bit hard to get so much detail on them, because the website hadn't been updated in a while, and the Untappd page hadn't really been updated so much either, other than people checking it in. But yeah, the backbone of this beer, as I say, it's this lovely kind of smooth, what I do suspect is American oak. As I've said in many reviews before, European oak is a little bit drier than American oak. It's a different species of tree, of course. But yeah, you get this lovely smooth American oak in there. There's a wee bit of a kind of vanilla type quality in this one, and then you can smell a wee bit of the kind of bourbon brown sugar coming out of this beer. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, that one. You do get the more that you smell of this beer and the more that it seems to warm up, the more of that you're getting. So yeah, that is definitely noticeable in this beer. But on top of that, the actual stout side of things is kind of quite mild. I think we're going to get more complexity and pungency in the actual flavour of the beer than we're going to get with the aroma here. But above the bourbon barrel, you do get a little bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. That's a wee bit there. There's a nice mix of like wholemeal and rye bready character in there, but again, it's not really overly pungent. If I sugar the beer up, I do get a little bit more stuff out of it. The bready character is actually kind of quite sweet and quite interesting in this one. So yeah, you do have to sugar this beer up a bit to get more aroma out of it. So yeah, roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. A wee bit of a more, a little bit of a more kind of, you get more rye bread out of it actually. It's kind of got a real bit of that rye bready sweetness. On top of that, a little bit of wholemeal brown bread, as I've said. And then I get quite a little bit of cocoa nib out of this one, that dry cocoa nibby type character. So for me, the chocolatey notes that you get out of this beer are actually around, you know, kind of about a 40% cocoa mark, I would say that. So maybe 50%. They do have a little hint of dark chocolate to them, but they're leaning more toward the milky end of the chocolatey spectrum. But yeah, one or two tiny little hints of nutty character in there, and then of course you've got the brown sugar sitting on top of that. So for me, there's a little bit of toasty brown sugary character in there, a good little bit of a sweet, good little bit of a kind of sweet caramelly note, a little bit of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy character too, which is interesting. And I would say that this beer, it almost has a little bit of an almost milk stout quality to it. It's got a little bit of a kind of like lactosey type note. That's really interesting. This is definitely one of the more kind of quirky and unusual Imperial stouts that I've come across anyway. I'm just curious about the things here. It says it contains barley malt and wheat malt, this one actually. So yeah, it could go a little bit of a way to explaining how kind of smooth this beer smells. But like I say, really not a pungent Imperial stout at all. In terms, pardon me, of the hoppy side of things with this beer, now Imperial stouts are not the most hop forward of styles in any case, and this one is of course barrel aged. So a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one because of the barrel aging. But yeah, you do get a little tiny bit of earthiness out of this one, a little touch of herbal character, and also little bits of floral aromaticity and grassiness. But the hoppy character in this beer really is pretty minimal, to be honest with you. There's not a lot to report in that side of things. Yeah, even when you sugar it up, yeah, the beer just has a little bit of grassiness, a little bit of floral character, and also a little bit of yeah, just also a little bit of yeah, it does. It just has a little bit of freshness to it, but as I say, not too much to report in terms of green component with this beer actually. So that's interesting. Yeah. On the fruity side of things as well, it does have a little bit of a kind of red fruity character, but again, it's not really that that kind of pungent. So yeah, I do get a little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness out of this one, a bit of a juicy plum underneath. But yeah, there's a wee bit of a kind of blackberry, black curranty type note to this one. So yeah, it's kind of juicy, and so there's a wee bit of sharpness in there. Again, like I say, a bit of a raisiny character, a little bit of blackberry, but then yeah, underneath you've got a bit of a plummy, black curranty type note out of this one. So yeah, it's interesting. It really is quite an interesting beer, this one. I'm just surprised that, especially as a Russian Imperial stout and a bourbon barrel-aged one, it's got so mild an aroma to it. So yeah, we'll just need to see how it turns out in the flavour. As I always say though, take a wee bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think we should taste this one now. So yeah, this is the Sans Pardon, an 11% bourbon barrel-aged Russian Imperial Stout from Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar in, the name of the town's gone right out of my head, Baarle-Hertog, a Belgian exclave inside the Netherlands. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers, santé, prost. Let's do this. Ooh. That's pretty interesting, that. Yeah. So, I'm going to state straight away, this is definitely one of the smoothest and kind of, yeah, it absolutely has to be one of the smoothest Imperial Stouts that I've ever come across, actually. It's not even dry or anything like that. It's just really, really smooth, and it's not silky either. It's got this dry, smooth character to it, but it is a very nice beer, actually. I think, as I say, we're going to get more and more out of this as it kind of warms up. So yeah, when you take this beer in, it's got a really nice little bit of fruitiness to it. And then you get the breadiness, a little bit of the dryness coming out, and the whole thing just kind of dries up and gives you more complexity. You really get, this is one of these beers where everything kind of develops in the aftertaste, and it's really interesting because, you know, as I say, after 3,800 reviews, you want beers that are going to test your palate a little bit and show you something different. And this one really goes about its business in a very different way from what we've had from a number of beers over the years, and there's nothing wrong with that in my book. So thumbs up to the Dochter van de Korenaar for you know, doing something a wee bit outside of the box, because like I say, this is not a beer you would normally associate with a Belgian brewery, actually. And that said, these guys are just started in 2007, so they're only about 16 years old, so really they are one of the new, I guess, definitely one of the new wave of Belgian breweries. Belgium, of course, had a boom of like a new generation of breweries from the 80s onwards, and it's still going. But yeah, I do like how this goes together, that's for sure. Okay, so in terms of the flavour of this beer, then we'll just break it down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So, middle third of your palate, then you've got that lovely kind of oaky backbone to this beer. So, the oaky backbone in this beer, again, it's very, very smooth, but it does have a little bit more dryness to it. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was using one of these kind of Hungarian oak barrels that they have. But as I say, it says specifically bourbon barrel aged. So yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of smooth woody backbone to the beer. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of kind of vanilla out of this one, and it does have a little bit of a kind of the woody, the spirit that's in this one has a little bit of a kind of brown sugary note, which you'd expect of bourbon, but it also has a little bit of an almost like fruity, sherry, brandy-ish type note to it, which is interesting. Yeah, so the woody backbone of this beer is pretty unusual too. But I will say that the more you drink of this beer, the more the kind of roasty, toasty side of the stout you start to get out of it too. So, yeah, above the spirit then, you've got a bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, although I would say that is very smooth. It's not really dry and bitter or anything like that. So yeah, a bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. It does get drier and more roasty the further into the aftertaste you go, but not initially. Above that, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of, it is a little bit almost sponge cakey in character, but it's also kind of wholemealy and kind of brown bready. You've got this kind of grainy bready character sitting above the bread crust, and then yeah, above that you get the kind of chocolatey, cocoa nibby type quality. So at the back of that middle third of the palate, you have like a really dry, kind of 80-90% cocoa, chocolatey cocoa nib. But as you move further forward, you can feel the chocolatey notes kind of just sort of mellowing out, if you like. And as you reach the front of that middle third of the palate, you can feel that the powdery cocoa nibby character is a little bit more like almost a kind of Nesquik sort of chocolate powdery character. It really, really mellows out across the range of that middle third of your palate. So I do like that in this one. Yeah. On top of that kind of chocolatey layer, you start to get some of the brown sugars in this one. So for me, above the chocolatey layer, you've got a little layer of a kind of leathery brown sugar there, which would normally indicate a slightly longer wort boil. Usually with Imperial Stouts, there are two things you can do with them. So you can either go down the route of giving them a very long wort boil to get a more complex flavour, or you can do like a double mash or something to get that big sticky sort of mouthfeel out of this one. This doesn't feel like it does either, to be honest with you. This is fairly light, kind of fairly light in terms of its mouthfeel for an Imperial Stout. It just feels like a more old school beer, this one. But yeah, as I say, you've got a little bit of a slight leather above the kind of cocoa nibby note. You've got a bit of a leathery layer of brown sugar, a wee bit of a toasty brown sugary layer on top of that, and then in the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little touch of a kind of sweet but quite dry caramelly note out of this one, and maybe just a wee tiny hint of like a McVitie's digestive biscuit. But it's the sort of leathery dry brown sugars and the toasty brown sugars above that that kind of linger into the aftertaste, and you get more and more of the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust coming out of this one the further into the aftertaste that you go. But I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate in this beer. Let's go to the back third of your palate then. And what I'll say is that the back third of the palate, you often get similar flavours. They just come out in different intensities, but generally speaking with your palate, more bitter and dry flavours will come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours will come out further forward. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build-up, and there's a bit of rye bread underneath and a bit of a wholemeal kind of brown bready character above that. But then yeah, on the back third of your palate in the base, there's a really nice kind of dry, there is a sort of, the woody character is a little bit drier for sure. The spirit layer above that feels a little bit more kind of toasty and dry. Then you have the well-fired bread crust, which again feels a lot drier. You've got a little bit of an almost kind of rye bready layer there on that back third of your palate too, and then a more kind of sponge cakey wholemeal brown bready layer on top of that. And these two kind of cakey and bready layers just feel a little bit lighter and a bit more airy. And above that, you can feel some of the really dry aspects of the cocoa nib just creeping on top of it there. And then you've got the yeasty character coming out of the beer as well, which is really nice. So yeah, just keep that in mind with this one. So the yeasty character for me, it's quite, the yeasty character is interesting because it has like quite a sweet, almost kind of wholemeal and rye bready character to it, but there's a bit of woodiness and a bit of cracker to it, and it's just wrapped in a little bit of a kind of honeycomb, toasty brown sugary sort of thing. I always get a bit of honeycomb on the back third of the palate for sure. But yeah, the way it goes together, I think, is really quite nice in that sense. I do like the bit of yeastiness that you get out of this beer, the further into the aftertaste that you go, but you get more and more of the roasty, toasty, bread crusty characters coming out of this one as well, which are quite interesting. But definitely on the back third of the palate, you can feel that the flavour is taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, that's interesting for sure. But yeah, let's move on to the hoppy side of things with this beer then. So back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, there's a wee bit of herbal character but not too much. And then, yeah, as you push further forward on this one toward the kind of front corners of your palate, there is a little bit of floral character, and around the front curve of your palate you get a little bit of grassiness. I'm not sure exactly how old this beer is. Does it say? It just says February 2025, so I'm guessing it's maybe been bottled in February of this year. So it's not been in the bottle too long. It didn't say how long they'd actually aged this one for, but like I say, you still get a little bit of hoppy character out of this one, and you could obviously age it for longer. Imperial stouts will last a fairly long time, especially the barrel aged ones. But yeah, you still do get a little bit of hoppy character out of this one, and at this point in time, I would say. So yeah, I like that. It does give the beer a little bit more depth. In terms of the front third of your palate, then you've got that nice. You've got a really interesting thing going on with this. So you've got on the border region between front and middle third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in this one, so you can feel. And yeah, you can feel that underneath in that layer you've got a little bit more of a kind of rye, brown bready character than a bit of wholemeal bread above. But then the base of that front third of your palate, you can feel the smooth aspects of the wood. Not so much spirit on this one, then just a little bit of bread crust, a little bit of toasty well-fired bread crust, and then a wee bit of brown bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at that. So yeah, that is one thing about this beer as well. The fruitiness is really quite juicy compared to a number of other Imperial stouts that I've come across, because usually they've got a little bit of oiliness to them. But yeah, when you take the beer in, you've got a really nice little bit of a kind of raisiny character out of this one. So yeah, a little bit of a raisiny note coming out of it in the beginning, but then yeah, you get a lot of juicy plum. So you go to the back of that front 30 pack, a little bit of raisin, a little bit of juicy plum underneath, and as you move further forward, you've got a good little bit of an oily, juicy kind of figgy character in there, and then as you move further forward, you have a bit of you've got a nice bit of kind of black currant in there, and you get a wee touch of just juicy blackberry sitting on top of that. But yeah, like I say, the fruity character for me in this one, compared to other Imperial stouts, is really quite juicy. Yeah, really is quite interesting, that one, I have to say. Yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about this beer in terms of its flavour though. But like I say, it's a very light and, for me, quite easy drinking Imperial stout. This one is quite old school in terms of its flavour profile, but quite unique in terms of the way all these flavours come out, I would say. So yeah, the woody character in this one is quite unique. The kind of bready and cakey notes, the kind of the way the chocolate is, the way the brown sugar is. This is just a really kind of unusual one, this, because in terms of Russian Imperial stouts, it's nowhere near as bitter and toasty as I would have expected, but it does have a little bit more of that kind of Belgian-y, yeasty character, which you would expect. And I've had a number of Belgian stouts over the years which have always been quite interesting, so that could be an explanation for the flavour profile of this beer. But regardless, I do like this, and it certainly makes me quite curious to try a few more of the beers from these guys in any case. But yeah, let's round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, it is kind of mid-bodied, I would say. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It almost has a little bit of a kind of creamy mouthfeel to it, this one, but it really does get drier and drier the further into the aftertaste that you go. In terms of the IBU count with this beer, I would say this has got to be about, it doesn't feel that bitter. I mean, I think it's maybe about 50 or 60 IBUs. It's more about a kind of dry roastiness that comes out the further into the aftertaste you go, but you're getting some bitterness from the hops still. You've got a good bit of dryness from the barrel, I would say, and also just a wee bit of roasty toastiness from the malty side of things. But overall, I would say that the malty character is quite smooth actually. You get a little bit of a dry sweetness out of it the further you go into the aftertaste. It's kind of balancing these things, the roasty bitterness, the smoothness, and a little bit of a dry sweetness. Those are the three main elements to the malt base for me. So yeah, I want to say about 50 or 60 IBUs with this beer. The fruity notes in this beer as well, like we said, is very kind of juicy. A little touch of sharpness in the beginning, but it really gives you more of a kind of juicy character, and they're not overly oily. So for me, I would say that mouthfeel wise, this is a really interesting Imperial Stout. It gives you all the kind of flavours you'd expect, but just not in the way that you would normally expect. It really is more like a Belgian stout, this one. The more I think about this beer, the more I would describe it as being more and more kind of yeasty and bready, but still very, very smooth. And as I say, I do like how this one, this pieces together, so it gets a big thumbs up from me in that particular regard. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. A really, really interesting Imperial Stout that makes me very curious to try more beers from this brewery. So yeah, this was the Sans Pardon, an 11% bourbon barrel aged Russian Imperial Stout from Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar. Am I going to pronounce this right? Brouwerij De Dochter van de Korenaar. I did get it right actually, in my head at least, not speaking it. But yeah, this one comes to you from Baarle-Hertog, a Belgian exclave in the very south of the Netherlands. A really interesting beer, this one, and I do hope we can try more from these guys. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from these guys as well, and we will no doubt return to them again at some point in the fairly near future. But until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, see you guys in the next review. Ciao just now.